As the morning sun peeked over the rolling hills of Swinewood, casting a golden hue across the dew-covered meadows, I, Snout, stretched my legs and let out a contented snort. Life in our village was a symphony of simple pleasures and gentle routines that bound us to this idyllic place. The air was perfumed with the earthy scent of truffles, mingling with the sweet aroma of apple blossoms that drifted from Granny Hambottom's orchard nearby. The distant babble of the brook provided a soothing backdrop to our daily activities, its melodic chatter a constant companion as we went about our tasks. Elder Hambottom, our village's revered storyteller, was a character as lively as the spring lambs frolicking in the meadow. His tales of daring pig heroes and mischievous woodland spirits captivated young and old alike, often leaving us in stitches with his exaggerated gestures and booming voice that carried across the entire village square. Each story he spun carried with it a sense of nostalgia for simpler times, when legends were born under the shade of ancient oaks, and bravery was measured by the size of one's heart. Our herd, a motley crew of pigs with personalities as varied as the wildflowers that dotted our paths, went about their days with a delightful mix of curiosity and routine. There was Gruntilda, the gossip-loving sow, who could sniff out a juicy rumor faster than a truffle in the ground, her snout twitching with excitement whenever she caught wind of village news. And then there was Oinker, the perpetually clumsy piglet who often found himself in sticky situations, quite literally, once getting tangled in Elder Hambottom's storytelling cloak during one of his more dramatic retellings. As I ambled through the village square, exchanging morning greetings with my neighbors and pausing to nibble on a fallen acorn, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. Swinewood was more than just a place to call home. It was a sanctuary steeped in memories of laughter, shared meals, and the comforting presence of friends. The sunlit paths weaved through orchards ripe with promise, and the distant hills whispered tales of adventures yet to be had. And as I watched the sun rise higher in the sky, illuminating the quaint cottages and lush orchards that dotted our landscape, I couldn't help but feel a swell of gratitude. Swinewood was a tapestry of moments of quiet contentment and joyful camaraderie that painted the canvas of our lives with hues of warmth and belonging. As I trotted through the village square, my hooves stirring up a cloud of dust that caught the morning sunlight, I spotted Oinker near Granny Hambottom's orchard. His round pink form was unmistakable, and as I approached, I could see him nervously sniffing at the ground, his ears twitching at every rustle of leaves. "Morning, Oinker," I called out, trying to inject a cheerful note into the crisp air. Oinker jumped, startled, before turning to greet me with a nervous smile. Morning, Snout," he stammered, his voice wavering slightly. I noticed the tension in his posture, the way his eyes darted nervously around, as if expecting trouble to leap out from behind the apple trees. It wasn't like Oinker to be so on edge. Usually, he was the piglet who found humor in every mishap, even his own. "You seem jumpy today," I remarked, sidling up beside him. "Everything all right?" Oinker shifted uncomfortably, kicking at a loose pebble. "Well, you know, Snout, I've been hearing some things." He glanced around cautiously before leaning in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "About the wolf pack. They've been getting bolder in the neighboring village, attacking more frequently." My snout wrinkled in concern. The wolves had always been a shadow looming on the edge of our peaceful existence, but news of their increased aggression sent a chill down my spine. "That's not good," I muttered, my voice tinged with frustration. "Those poor pigs over there. We can't just stand by and do nothing." Oinker shuffled nervously, his gaze flickering towards the distant tree line where the forest began. "But what can we do, Snout? They're wolves, ferocious and cunning. We're just pigs." I stamped my hoof in frustration, my resolve hardening. That's exactly why we can't afford to cower in fear, Oinker. We may be pigs, but we're not defenseless. We have strength in numbers and the spirit to protect our own. Oinker looked up at me, uncertainty etched across his face. But what if we get hurt? What if they come here? I met his gaze with determination, placing a reassuring hoof on his shoulder. We'll face that if it happens. But for now, let's focus on being prepared. Maybe Elder Hembottom has some advice or stories that could help us understand our enemy better. Oinker nodded slowly, his nervous energy starting to ebb. All right, Snout, I'll try to be brave. I smiled encouragingly. That's the spirit, Oinker. Together, we'll make sure Swinewood stays safe and sound. As Oinker and I approached Elder Hembottom's favorite storytelling spot, a weathered oak tree whose gnarled roots served as natural benches, a hush fell over the gathering villagers. Elder Hembottom, with his gray whiskers twitching in anticipation, greeted us with a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his twinkling eyes. Ah, young Snout and Oinker, he boomed in his melodious voice, the kind that could carry tales to the farthest corners of Swinewood. What brings you both to my humble circle of wisdom on this fine morning? I exchanged a glance with Oinker, who swallowed nervously before speaking up. Elder Hembottom, we've heard troubling rumors about the wolf pack, he began, his voice trembling slightly despite his efforts to sound composed. They're attacking more frequently in the neighboring village. What? What do we do if they come here? Elder Hembottom's expression softened with understanding, his gaze shifting to the distant horizon where the forest met the sky. Ah, the wolves, he murmured, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. They are creatures of cunning and strength, my young friends. They roam the forests with a hunger that knows no bounds, always seeking to test the resolve of those who dwell nearby. He paused, as if gathering his thoughts, before continuing with the wisdom of ages etched in every line of his weathered face. For knowledge is our greatest weapon against such adversaries. The wolves you see operate in packs led by an alpha, a fierce leader who commands loyalty and obedience from the others. They strike swiftly and retreat just as quickly, leaving devastation in their wake. Oinker's ears perked up, his curiosity overcoming his earlier apprehension. How do we defend ourselves, Elder Hembottom? He asked, his voice steadier now. The elder pig smiled warmly, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of pride and reassurance. Courage, my dear Oinker, is the first shield against fear. Strength lies not only in muscle, but in unity. We must stand together, watchful and prepared, ready to defend our village and each other should the wolves dare to encroach upon our home. I nodded, absorbing his words with a solemn determination. What about their tactics, Elder? I pressed, my own sense of urgency growing. How do they choose their targets? Elder Hembottom stroked his chin thoughtfully, his gaze turning inward as if recalling tales from distant memories. The wolves are opportunists, Snout, he explained. They seek out the weak, the isolated, those who stray from the safety of their herd. Vigilance and solidarity are our greatest defenses. By staying close-knit and alert, we lessen their chances of finding a foothold within Swinewood. As his words settled over us like a comforting cloak, I glanced at Oinker, whose earlier fear seemed tempered by a newfound resolve. Rumors of the wolves' increasing boldness spread like wildfire, filling every corner with whispers of impending doom. The once lively square now echoed with hushed conversations and anxious glances. Villagers huddled together, seeking safety in numbers, their fear binding them tighter than ever. Despite our efforts to stay vigilant, tragedy struck one fateful night. As dawn broke, the horrifying news spread. One of the piglets, a young and playful soul named Nibbles, had been lured out by the cunning wolves. His lifeless body was discovered near the edge of the forest, and his loss left an indelible mark on our hearts. The wolf's savagery was no longer just a distant threat. It was a brutal reality that had pierced the very heart of Swinewood. The atmosphere grew even more tense. Parents kept their piglets close, eyes darting nervously at every rustle in the bushes. The fear was stifling, suffocating, and it threatened to choke the spirit out of our once cheerful village. But as sorrow mingled with fear, something else began to stir within me. A burning fury. The wolves had taken one of our own, and I couldn't stand idly by while our village lived in terror. The next day, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, I made a decision. My heart was heavy with both grief and determination as I announced my plan to the villagers. "We can't let them think we're weak," I declared, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Tonight, I will pace the perimeter of the village. I will keep watch and ensure those wolves know we are not to be trifled with." Elder Hembottom frowned, his wise eyes filled with concern. "Snout, my dear boy, we must stay together. Strength lies in unity, not in solitary acts of bravery." "I understand, Elder," I replied, my tone respectful but resolute. "But we can't live in constant fear. We need to show them that we're not afraid to defend ourselves. I won't be far, and I'll return at the first sign of trouble." Despite his reservations, Elder Hembottom nodded, recognizing the fire in my eyes. The other villagers, however, were less convinced. Their fear was too deep, their wounds too fresh. No one stepped forward to join me. I didn't blame them. Fear is a powerful force, and it had sunk its claws deep into our hearts. As night fell, I took my position at the edge of the village, the cool breeze rustling the leaves above. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant howl of a wolf. Each sound seemed magnified, every shadow a potential threat. But I stood firm, my senses on high alert, determined to protect my home. The hours dragged on, the darkness pressing in around me. My mind raced with thoughts of Nibbles, of the other piglets, and of the wolves lurking just beyond our borders. The fear gnawed at me, but I channeled it into a fierce resolve. I would not let them take another life. I would stand guard, alone if I must, to keep Swinewood safe. And as the first light of dawn began to pierce the horizon, casting a pale glow over the village, I felt a glimmer of hope. I prepared myself for another night of patrol. My heart swelled with gratitude for the villagers who had raised me, taken me in as an orphan, and given me a home. These were my people, and I would do anything to protect them. During the night, I resumed my patrol along the village's perimeter. The moon hung high, casting an eerie silver glow over Swinewood. It was then that I heard it, the stealthy padding of paws approaching through the underbrush. My heart pounded in my chest as I saw their eyes gleaming in the darkness. The wolves were here, and leading them was the massive Alpha, his scarred face a testament to countless battles. Without a moment's hesitation, I turned and bolted toward the village, my hooves pounding the earth as I let out a desperate cry. "Wolves, they're here!" The village sprang to life, pigs emerging from their homes with expressions of fear and determination. The wolves, realizing they had been spotted, launched their attack, their growls and snarls filling the night air. Panic surged through me, but I refused to let it take hold. We could not give up. We had to fight. Amidst the chaos, a memory flashed through my mind, one of Elder Hembottom's stories. He had spoken of how wolves could be worn down by constant running and chasing, their stamina draining with each futile pursuit. It was a risky strategy, but it might be our only hope. As the alpha wolf lunged toward us, I made a split-second decision. I turned and sprinted into the dense bushes within the village, my heart pounding with both fear and determination. The alpha, seeing his prey flee, gave chase, his growls echoing in the night. I darted through familiar paths and hidden shortcuts, my hooves barely touching the ground as I navigated every corner with precision. The alpha's snarls grew louder behind me, but I could hear his breath growing ragged. My plan was working. The villagers, seeing what I was doing, began to do the same, leading the other wolves through a maze of bushes and narrow passages. The wolves, driven by their predatory instincts, followed, but their energy was waning as they struggled to keep up with our swift, zigzagging movements. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, the alpha began to slow, his growls turning into labored pants. Sensing his fatigue, I made a sharp turn and headed back toward the village, the alpha stumbling to keep up. The other wolves, similarly exhausted, began to retreat, unable to maintain their pursuit. As I re-entered the village, the villagers rallied around me, their faces shining with a mixture of relief and triumph. The wolves, now too fatigued to continue their attack, slunk back into the forest, their tails between their legs. The following night, despite our victory, tension hung in the air. The wolves had tasted defeat, but we knew they wouldn't give up so easily. As I paced the perimeter, I kept my senses sharp, every muscle in my body tensed for the slightest sign of danger. Suddenly a chorus of growls erupted from the darkness. This time, the wolves were more coordinated, their attack swift and brutal. They had learned from their previous encounter and came prepared, not allowing us the luxury of running. They encircled us, their eyes gleaming with a terrifying intelligence. A fierce battle erupted. The wolves lunged at us with renewed ferocity, their sharp teeth flashing in the moonlight. We fought back with all our might, but it was clear they had the upper hand. The air was filled with the sounds of snarls, squeals, and the clash of bodies. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Gruntilda get knocked to the ground, and something inside me snap. Fueled by adrenaline, I charged at the nearest wolf, my hooves striking with surprising force. The wolf yelped and staggered back, giving me a moment to catch my breath. "Fight, Swinewood, fight!" I roared, my voice echoing through the chaos. The villagers, inspired by my defiance, rallied. We attacked with a ferocity born of desperation, pushing back against the wolves with everything we had. Despite our efforts, the wolves were relentless. They bit and clawed, leaving painful wounds in their wake. Several of us were hurt, but we refused to back down. We were defending our home, our families, our way of life. In the midst of the fray, I remembered Elder Hambottom's tale of the wolves' endurance, or lack thereof. Though they had prepared for this fight, they still couldn't sustain such intense effort for long. We just had to hold out. I kept moving, kept striking, kept leading the wolves away from the more vulnerable villagers. Slowly, I saw signs of fatigue in the wolves. Their movements became less coordinated, their attacks more desperate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the alpha wolf gave a low, frustrated growl and signaled the retreat. The wolves slunk back into the shadows, leaving us battered but victorious. The aftermath was sobering. Several villagers were injured, and the toll on our morale was heavy. But as we tended to the wounded and gathered in the village square, a sense of pride began to emerge. We had faced the wolves head-on and defended our home. The cost was high, but we had shown that Swinewood was not an easy target. Elder Hambottom, his face lined with worry and relief, placed a reassuring hoof on my shoulder. "You fought bravely, Snout. We all did, and we will heal from this." In the days that followed, the village began to heal. The wounds were tended to, and defenses were fortified. But something else began to change as well. Everywhere I went, I noticed the looks of admiration and gratitude from my fellow villagers. Even Oinker, usually so timid, looked at me with newfound respect. One afternoon, as I was helping repair a fence, a group of piglets ran up to me, their eyes wide with excitement. "Look, it's Iron Snout," one of them squealed. I couldn't help but chuckle. "Iron Snout, huh? Gruntilda, passing by with a basket of apples, smiled warmly. "You've earned it, Snout. Your bravery gave us all hope." Elder Hembottom nodded in agreement. "Indeed. You showed us what it means to stand up against our fears. You've become a symbol of courage for all of Swinewood." The name caught on quickly. Soon, everyone was calling me Iron Snout. At first it felt strange, almost like a weight of responsibility. But as time went on, I embraced it. It wasn't just a name, it was a reminder of what we had achieved together. Oinker, still a bit skittish but visibly more confident, approached me one evening. "Iron Snout, do you think we can really keep the wolves away for good?" I looked at him, seeing the spark of hope in his eyes. "I believe we can, Oinker. As long as we stand together, there's nothing we can't overcome." And so, Iron Snout became not just my name, but a symbol of our village's resilience and unity. Swinewood was no longer just a collection of frightened pigs. It was a community bound by courage and determination. And as we continued to rebuild and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew that we would face them head on, with the spirit of Iron Snout guiding us forward.